Hey everybody, I forgot my sword. Thanks for tuning in to Niagara Broadsword Academy's online lessons. We're going to be doing only our advanced lessons in this format. So on Tuesdays we're going to set up a video for you guys to watch from one of our other instructors from around the world. Probably it will be J Mass's beginner videos that he puts out regularly, and that's what we're going to be doing on Tuesdays for our fundamentals. So make sure to keep up on Tuesdays by watching those videos. We're going to post them to our Facebook page and send them through chats and various other means. Then on Thursdays, as much as possible, we're going to try and tune in here with an advanced class. So that is the same as our regular advanced classes. We're going to have our students of our advanced class send in messages and questions that they have, and hopefully we'll get a couple of video messages from them as well. And they're going to highlight questions or original sources they found, or they're going to find other sources that they find, such as film and things like that. So that's normally what we do for advanced classes. We have some students come in and say, well, I learned this technique from a source, or I saw this technique on TV, or I got hit by this technique last week in sparring, and they bring that in and they want to work on that. So that's how we normally do it, and that's how we're going to continue to do it. But before we get started on all that, let's get set up a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is I want you guys to try as much as possible to remember to wear a uniform, which is to say wear something different from you normally wear. I know everyone's making the jokes about working at home and staying at home and all that stuff and wearing your pajamas 24/7, but it's actually quite important that you don't. So I've been working from home for about 5 years, and part of the psychology of the whole thing is to make sure that you have a schedule, and part of the schedule includes how your body feels. So you're going to want to make sure that you don't work in your kitchen, and you're going to want to make sure that you don't wear your pajamas all day long. So part of this schedule is continuing our Tuesday and Thursday classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I appreciate you guys sending this video out and sharing it and even watching it on other days, but as much as possible, if you try to stick to that 7 to 9 o'clock schedule that we normally have, and you guys watch these videos and you guys participate at that time. So we're going to have a fairly short video. It's not going to be 2 hours each night, but you're going to have things that you can take home to work on, you're going to have things to practice, and then you can shoot your own videos where you can just ask the questions that you want to ask for next week, or you can just keep in touch and chat. I'd love to see you guys and have you guys chat with us that way. So as much as possible, keep a schedule, and part of keeping a schedule is also with the way that you dress. Also, it becomes a little bit more difficult at home sometimes to create that space for yourself. And I realize that for some people that fencing is a space for themselves. And it's a time for them to do something that they value and feel is important. So don't lose that. Make sure that everyone in your family understands that this time is for you, and that you need a little bit of space to do what you've got to do. So for space, here you can see we've been blessed with a fairly large house, so we have a lot of space that we can move around in. If you don't have this much space, the minimum that you're going to need is going to be about 6 feet wide and about 10 to 12 feet long. Okay, so try as much as you can to make that space available for yourself, at least Tuesday and Thursday nights. As you can see, I've moved the table to the side and stuff like that, so make a few adjustments to get as much space as possible. Now the maximum space is going to be about 15 by 15, which is the size of our fighting ring. You're never going to need much more than that. So if you have a garage or a backyard or wherever you are that you can stay safe and isolated, and also inside preferably, then you have all the space that you need. Now, because this is my house, I'm not wearing my shoes, but for certain techniques and things like that, you are going to need your shoes, and of course if you're outside, you're going to need your shoes as well. So that's the space you're going to need. As for materials, if you guys are advanced students, you should all have what you need. So you have the outfit that you need, and you have your sword. I would recommend sometimes for some of our techniques you are going to want to wear a glove, and you are going to want to wear your entire kit sometimes. And if you're outside and it's cold, then do that. So that's what you're going to need to get started. If you're inside, I may also recommend that instead of using your regular sword, if you don't have a lot of room, then just like Jay says in his videos, you can use a rolling pin. You can use I prefer a framing hammer. It's weighted well. So if you don't have a whole lot of space, swing that framing hammer around. Also a good reason to keep your kids away from the space that you're using. So we're going to try as much as possible to keep our scheduling the same, to keep our methodology the same for Advanced Student Night. So what we're going to start with, as usual, is we're going to start with some footwork. Then we're going to talk about what everyone brought, and then we're going to break those things down. But for this lesson, I'm just going to remind everybody about the sort of stricter format of our Advanced Student Night. We don't always follow it very strictly, and I haven't articulated it to each and every person. So that's part of what we're going to bring tonight. So, but first, footwork. So we're just going to start with our standard regimental footwork, and all we're going to do is we're going to move through our space, and we're going to explore your new space a little bit. See what the difference is in, see my floor's a little bit slippery, so feel the difference in the space that you're using. Now in tournaments and things like this, you're going to be encountering new spaces. For example, our Great Fight North tournament was done on a terrain that was very sticky, and we had a lot of people comment on that fact that they felt that they were sticking everywhere and that they were at risk possibly for rolling an ankle because they couldn't slide their feet. This is something to consider, but more importantly in your training, train on different surfaces so that you're prepared for that. So from a sport perspective, this prepares you for other tournaments that might have different surfaces that you have to be aware of. And from a traditional or historical perspective, you need to train on different surfaces because you're not always going to be in exactly the same situation. Whether you're training on a field, say in a fort, and that field is mostly clay, for example. When you go to fight somewhere else, you might find that the place that you're fighting in is not clay. The place that you're fighting in is loam or is muskeg or something like this. So the terrain is going to shift. It could be even gravel, it could be pavement. You could end up fighting inside. So it's important to train on different surfaces, and so take this opportunity to explore new surfaces. Now that said, for training purposes, make sure there's nothing obstructing the ground where you are. Okay? It's one thing to train specifically to step over things, which is also important for a different reason, but never have a training surface in your home or whatever that has like an obstacle. Like even this is probably not something that I would recommend. Don't train over something like this. It's a bad idea. Okay, that could very easily lead to injury, especially when you're concentrating on other things. You're thinking about doing one thing and you also have to think about this obstacle. So don't have obstacles in your training space. And that's it. So we're going to start with just a bit of footwork as usual. If you don't have a lot of space, forward and backward, practice your lunges, reminding yourself to send your arm out first and then your step in your lunge. Well, that was very poor. It was quite slippy. So train on your footwork and do that for about 20 minutes. And explore your space, forward, remember your lateral footwork, remember your circular footwork, remember forward, backward. You want to do regimental, you also want to do Highland style. So do as much of the footwork as you can in the space that you're given and fully explore it. So now what we're going to work on is, I'm just going to go over the system that we've put in place for advanced classes, and I'm going to remind everybody about how they work structurally. So I'm going to say this multiple times in this segment of the video. I want you guys to send in the chat, in the comments of this video, or as another video, I want you guys to send in your questions for Advanced Night before Thursday. I don't shoot these on Thursday, I shoot these on Sunday. So on the Thursday that you watch, ask for the following week, okay? Or shoot the video that you're going to ask for the following week. So what we do now in our advanced class segment is we go around a circle of people and we ask each person what they've brought, and they bring one of a couple of things. a lot of our students bring things in from educational sparring, which is great because that's a sport focus, which is a good thing for a lot of people to have. So they're trying to get better at the sport. So when they get beat by something, when they keep getting hit on the outside of the arm, they come in and they say, hey, I keep getting hit right here. I got a big bruise, I got hit here like 4 times by different people. What am I doing that exposes this part of my arm? So they bring in a specific question like that about sport fencing, which is fantastic. So they'll come in with something like that, or they'll come on the other side and say, hey, I keep trying to do the Turkish disarm, and I landed here. I landed on an outside circle guard, and I moved to step out, and this never connects. And so we'll work through an offensive maneuver maybe that they're doing, that they don't know why it's not connecting, and they bring it back around. They're trying to pull off a maneuver, and at some point it keeps failing. So we'll go through that maneuver that they're doing and try and find its weak points. And for the rest of the club too, because someone else may have never tried the Turkish disarm before, they might not know about it. So this will be their introduction to it, and they'll learn how to do it for the first time, whereas this other advanced student has been trying and trying and trying, and they just can't get it in sparring. So those are the examples that we get from free sparring, which is a great educational way to do it. Now, previously we've had students in the past who were much more interested in historical broadsword fencing, and we love to have those guys out too. Our other instructor, Mike, who's graciously editing these videos for us, thank you, Mike, and one of our students he hasn't shown up in a while, but Jeff used to bring in historical sources all the time, and that was where they got the majority of their interest and their information. So they would bring a historical source, and they'd either bring a paragraph that explains a technique, or they would bring an image of a technique, or they'd bring an entire book and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. I would be interested in exploring how to actually get this done. And a lot of the time it was novel to us too, so the instructors would have never come across it, and we'd say, hey, yeah, let's give it a shot. So it's great to also bring historical sources. If you have a historical source that you want to post in the comments, either on YouTube or in our private chat, then we can review the private source, and I can also show it on these videos as well to everybody, and then we can review it and go from there. The last source that we get sometimes, and it's Jason who usually brings them in, and I love to get these ones too, which is sources from popular fiction or non-fiction, but it's fiction. So either from historical movies, from other sword fighting movies like Star Wars, or from like quasi-historical shows. So what is the Greatest Warrior, or whatever it is, where they make 2 historical people, like contemporaneous people, fight. And so they'll bring in those people and they say, well, how would I, as a broadsword fencer, for example, how would I fight against somebody who has an axe? Or they'll bring in a specific technique they saw. One of the ones was Count Dooku cutting off Obi-Wan Kenobi's arm in the Star Wars movie, coming over the top. So we'll explore those and we'll say, okay, well, how was it done in the movie? And is that a useful technique for us? Is that something that we can do? And surprisingly, sometimes you'll find that it is. That shot over the arm really brought us into a conversation about hitting the arm the usual way and hitting the arm in unusual ways. And so you'll find that a lot of that conversation is really important. So if you guys see, while you're sitting at home watching, Netflix with the family, and you're watching Kingdom, or you're watching any of those other movies, and you see a clip from there, just tag, for example, the time that it happens, or if you can get the clip of it, just tag something like that and show us. And then again, we'll try and present this in the video if possible, if Mike can help us out with that, because it is within fair use to criticize sword fighting techniques. So hopefully YouTube won't ban us for it, but they probably will. So these are how we go through our advanced student events. So once you bring something in, then we start working with it, and we have a system also that we use to work through anything that our students bring in. So the system starts on the footwork and then it moves upward. Now when we're doing these drills solo at home, we're going to have to pause in a particular spot, which is fine. We'll just work with it as is. So we'll start with Roworth's feint this way, over the top. And we'll say that someone brought in Roworth's feint over the top, Lonigan's feint over the top, and we'll start from there. So the first thing that we're doing is the footwork. We're reminding ourselves that this is a cut that we're making, and so we're going to step with it from second to third. Now in this particular maneuver, the footwork isn't too hard to work with, but we have found in the past that the key to unlocking most of these things that people bring in, especially the things where we don't really understand the context, we don't really understand how to get started on it, people get bound up in the middle of it, and then they start making these sort of big assumptions and these big sideways lateral movements around the technique that land them in a weird place. And they do this because they haven't started on the footwork. And we saw this a couple of years ago with Turkish arm gate, right? Or the Turkish disarm gate, where a lot of people had a lot of extremely varied interpretations of how the Turkish disarm works. And I feel that that was started with people not taking the simple act of footwork as the anchor and saying, well, it starts with a defensive maneuver, so it starts by moving back. We're going to start there. And if you put those constraints on, it allows you to sort of get rid of an aspect of it that's unknown, because it's not often talked about in the movies. You don't see their feet. In a lot of the stuff, they don't describe the footwork precisely. So once you get rid of that, you can do the rest of the maneuver using the more precise language that they have, or using the more precise examples. So we're going to start with footwork. With this feint in particular, you're on an inside guard, your opponent is on an inside guard as well. You're coming up over their guard, and then you're choosing which side that you're going to hit them on. So when you come up over the guard, if they see you coming onto this side, they're going to do an outside guard. So you're going to switch back to the inside. If you're on the inside guard and you come up here and they see you coming this way, but they anticipate the feint, or they think you're coming out this way, then they maintain the inside guard, or they even push it in further, then you're going to come up over here. Same with if you're pressing against them with some pressure, and you release, and they move this way, then when you release, their sword will move out of the way, and you can bring it straight down onto their wrist. So this goes over the top, and then there's a decision point here. Now it's key that you remember that there's a decision point here. What you'll see a lot of people do with this feint when they start doing it is they make the decision point where we recommend you make a different decision point. Before you engage, or at the very least while you're engaged with your opponent and you're giving blows and you're receiving blows, this is how we recommend that you do the rhythm drills against your opponent. Instead of the blade play that sabers and things like that do, we recommend you just do cuts and guards. And when you're doing these cuts and guards, here you decide, okay, what technique am I going to use to prevent them from anticipating my technique? And so while you're exchanging blows in that way, in that rhythm fashion, you decide what technique you're going to use. Don't decide which side to put your feint on there, because you don't have the information you need. What you need to do is from here, you receive a blow, you give a blow, you receive a blow on the outside, you give a blow here, they come on your inside. Now you've decided to do the feint. You haven't decided which side to go on, because when you step forward to make the feint, and then you use this information of which side they're on to make the cut. Otherwise, it's just a cut to the outside, or a cut to the inside, because you've decided before you've started where it's going. So you've got to wait, and you've got to hesitate a little bit. That's why it's a feint, that's why it's a deceptive play. So the footwork. Now typically, you're going to be going one of two ways. Either you're going to have just received a blow, and then you're in first, and then you're going to decide and cut, or you're going to be in second, and you're going to be engaged in blade play, like this, and then you're going to cut. The important thing being that your cut lands with your foot, and that your cut lands probably in third. You're going to want third. Because even if you are in a defensive action, you're going to want to go out to third because they may be also escaping from you. So don't cut from first, like this. So you're going to be either from first to third, or you're going to be in second, and you're going to make the cut. And again, make sure your foot lands as the cut comes down, as we always recommend. So, now we've got the footwork worked out. It's just a step, right? Here or here. That's it. So, now you're going to just figure it out for yourself. So this is the second part of all of our techniques, is just on your own, figure out what you're supposed to be doing. So here I am, deciding which side, making the cut. Now that's very slow. Speed it up a bit. Here I am, deciding which side, making the cut. Here I am, deciding which side, making the cut. Okay, we've got it figured out. We've got the bit of hesitation. Okay, so we're going to make it a hesitation. Now here's the important point of any deception. You're going to make sure that the the deception sort of point is as short as possible, because that also is the amount of time that you're going into false time. So if I was here and I was just to make a cut, versus I'm here and I'm going to bring my point up and then make a cut, this hang time we call false time. So this is the time in which someone can counter your deception with a timing cut. In the next thing we'll go over the rock, paper, scissors theory of sport fencing. So this is the time in which someone can use a timing cut. So if you're against someone whose timing cuts are poor or their own timing is bad, they're not going to be able to make a cut in that time. They're also not going to be able to make a decision in that time because they're going to think that the decision is rote, that it's either right or left. But you're actually deciding at that point to cut at their weak point. So they're going to decide on something and they're going to be wrong because you can re-decide at that point. So if you're against someone whose timing is very tight or who has timing techniques that they use that are very quick, then you're going to be in danger because when you come up here, you're going to get sniped in so many different places. Because as you come up, they're going to see your arm is clean. If your arm isn't open because you come up over the blade this way, and your arm isn't open here, they're going to be able to snipe you somewhere else. As you move this way, they're going to be able to retreat quickly and avoid your attack and then hit your arm when you're out. So there are a large number of timing maneuvers that can be used against this deception, and the faster you are at making that call, the faster you're going to be able to avoid those timing maneuvers, and the larger, more skilled group of people you're going to be able to pull this off against. The other thing I'll mention is something that Jay mentions all the time with his feints and deceptions. These only work against sort of slightly advanced students, right? Because if someone has just picked up the sword and you go onto this side, they're going to look at you like they don't understand what's going on. So the deception's not going to work. You're going to have to just make a cut every time because they're not going to move. And so in general, deceptions work best against people who are at a very similar level to you, maybe slightly not as good as you, or a deception that really is outstanding that people are really not expecting against someone who's slightly better than you. So typically what we do next is we get a partner and we attempt to just land the feint. Okay? If you are lucky enough to have a PEL, to have a static target that you can use, at this point in your training you would be doing your PEL practice. Okay? So that is against your PEL, to make sure you land that cut and you feel the sensation of the cut landing so that your muscle memory is continuing through that landing of the cut. After that, we do an exchange. So we have one person start, and the person who's performing the technique always starts. And if you have a partner who you can use for this, that's great, who's self-isolating with you, that's awesome. So use them at this point. And they don't have to be overly skilled, but they do need a small amount of training and skill to be at this point. So what you're going to do is you're just going to start by making a cut, and then receiving a cut. And of any of the 6 cuts and guards, the standard 6 cuts and guards, you're going to make a cut, you're going to receive a cut, you're going to make a cut, you're going to receive a cut, you're going to make a cut, you're going to receive a cut, and when you feel comfortable, instead of making a regular cut, you're going to come over the top, decide which side to go on, and feint quickly in. So that is how you do the technique in a paired simple drill. That's a paired rhythm drill that we do. And then once you have that technique down, the last stage is, of course, to bring it out in educational sparring and attempt in a free sparring environment to pull the technique down while the other person's not necessarily cooperating and they're not necessarily even thinking of the same technique as you. They might be trying a different technique. So in educational sparring, unlike competitive sparring, we're both just trying to pull off a technique. So we're still counting points usually because the judges are also practicing. So we're still counting points, we're still having judges call hold and so on and so forth, but that's for the judges to get their skills better. And the students are really not worried about trying to get the points. What they're really worried about is trying to get that technique. So that they can come in next week and say, hey, I nailed the feint, I'm happy with my feint, but I keep getting hit here, or I keep being unable to do this other technique, and they have something else to move on to. So that's how we do our educational sparring. So a reminder of how the structure of our advanced class works: we start with the footwork, then we do solo drill, then we do a paired rhythm drill, then we do a target drill, sorry, so that's against, make sure you're landing in the right spot and that your footwork is moving properly, and then we have a paired rhythm drill, and then we have educational sparring. So for that target drill, feel free to send in a video of you doing the target drill. So use the camera as one target. So here's my feint, and you guys can critique this one if you want. So we're going to make sure our footwork is proper, we're going to come up over here, and we're going to land on that side. And we're going to make the decision of where to land when we're up. So we're going to come up over the sword on either side, from here over onto that side, from here over onto that side. And we're going to try and land in the stomach region. Also do it sideways, so that we can see your footwork and your technique on this side. So over the top on that side, over the top on that side. Ooh, these are kind of janky. I should practice more. So feel free to send in a video, and we can post that and we can talk about that as well on our Thursday night classes of your target drill. And then if you have a partner, do your rhythm drill. That's awesome. And if you have a partner who's able to free spar with you, even better, and do some educational sparring to try and get those techniques out. So that's how we typically do it.